Well, thanks, Mark. Good morning, everybody. My name is Felix Liao, and I lead the Analytics Platform Group at SAS Australia and New Zealand. I am a local, so I'm based out of the Sydney office up in New South Wales, and as a benefit of that, for the last 15 years, I have been speaking to local company organizations, that's all the ones you've worked for, around the use of data and analytics. Now, as part of my job, one of my favorite things to do is actually come and speaking to these type of conferences and meeting people. Because I find I always learn something new when I come to these type of conferences, and hopefully I get to share some practical insight from an industry perspective with all of you during this talk. Now, as I said, a big part of my job is to talk to customers around general trends and challenges around the whole area of data science. As you can imagine, the topic in the last 6 months is all leads to a particular topic, and that is artificial intelligence. And I'll be honest with you, every time I have those type of conversations, I start to see this type of expression, the faces, looks like this. Now, you might be speaking to your CFO, your CEO, your line of business managers, and you might be seeing some of these faces. The expression I was trying to get at is, when I have this conversation, people have this expression, it's one of excitement, there's a little bit of awe, but there's also a little bit of confusion around what exactly is AI. AI is getting a lot of coverage both in the technology and the business medias, and there's story around autonomous cars, killer robots, intelligent chatbots. It's really capturing the imagination of everybody. Now, but to say that AI has reached hype level is probably a fair statement. Just the other day, I saw an offer online where someone was trying to sell me a smart rubbish bin powered by AI. So we're getting into interesting territories. But having said that, AI does hold tremendous potential in transforming organizations. We at SAS believe in the power of AI to drive competitive differentiators, superior customer services, and new products and services. But in order to do that, I think we need to cut through the noise. We need to fast track to the other side of the hype curve to get to the outcome and get to the value. So what I want to do for this talk is do exactly that. So I want to provide some practical advice from an industry perspective around how you can get there, how you can get to the value. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to cover 3 topics. First of all, I want to talk about the evolution of AI, how it's the same or different for analytics as we know it. Secondly, I want to talk about technology. What do you need to think about? What do your organization need to think about so you have the technology underpinning component to be successful on this journey? And thirdly, I want to talk about people. What is the role of people, if any, in the age of AI? Now, let's start from the first part. Let's start by defining artificial intelligence. Turns out this is not as easy as you might think. But I think personally, incredibly useful so you can have a conversation around AI at a different level of the business. You can't really have a robust conversation about AI if your CEO doesn't know what the hell it is. So let's define this. Now, at SAS, we do have a definition for AI. We define AI as the science of training systems to emulate human tasks through learning and automation. Now, to some of you, this might still seem kind of a generic definition. Now, we think it's a pretty useful definition because it's practical, right? If you think about AI in this context, it really helps guide you through how you can apply AI in the business context. So let me take you through some example of that. If I go to the next level of AI, we think AI should be about 3 parts. There's 3 components of AI that makes it useful in the corporate context. It should be about learning. AI should involve some elements of learning about the data, to pick up trends and patterns. Once you've done that, you should drive some automation through the AI. You should drive some automation through the models. Through the automation, augmentation of AI, you should get some value out of it. Now, the value is an incredible important part of the conversation. Depending on your vertical, depending on your industry, the value you should be looked for is different, obviously. So unless someone works for Uber here, having an autonomous AI car is not going to be of value to you, clearly. But what about some of the other examples that you should think about? What about images? Now, we already talked about computer vision from the previous presentation. AI has the ability to learn through images, and through that, AI can support the process of identifying people. Is it you, is it someone else? That's obviously valuable from a security, safety perspective. Implication of that in the surveillance area, there's implication in the border security area. What about transaction data, right? As we know, AI can now process and learn transactions. And through that, we can automate the process of identify certain type of outcomes. For example, fraud, right, which is a classic example in the banking context. And that's obviously of value to the bank because it reduces the overall risk to the bank and to the consumers. What about user behaviors? AI can learn through your buying behavior, and then as a result of that, help us automate the process to figure out what are you going to buy? When are you going to buy it? And that's obviously valuable from a retail perspective. A great example of that is Amazon, as some of you know. Some of you might know that AI and data science is one of the key competitive differentiator for Amazon. I think Amazon has gone as far as saying they're not really a retailer, they're an AI business. So it's a big deal from the retail perspective. And finally, what about text? What about conversations? AI can now learn through textual data, as we just discussed, to learn about the conversations. What are our customers talking about? Are they happy? Are they upset? And through the automation of that process, drive some value in terms of customer satisfaction, right? So I think this gives a nice framework to think about how we're going to apply AI in the corporate perspective. Now, for those of you who's been doing analytics for a little while, you might be thinking, I've seen this before, it looks familiar. And you'll be right, because AI is not a completely new discipline, right? I find it useful to think about AI as a continuation and extension of advanced analytics. So most of you have the foundation skill to actually drive AI applications and outcome, because it's built on the foundation of data science, right? Classic knowledge around logistic regression, linear regression are very much the foundation of AI. But modern AI applications also involve machine learning techniques, right? Modern machine learning techniques like gradient boosting, random forest. It also includes deep learning techniques like neural networks, as we just touched on. But modern AI application does branch out into other areas of specializations, right? We've heard about autonomous cars, computer visions, translation services. They're really a combination of the different techniques, different machine learning techniques, different deep learning techniques. So AI does branch into other complex areas, but it doesn't have to be, right? AI application can just involve traditional machine learning techniques. And I will argue that from a business perspective, most of the economic value for AI will come out of traditional machine learning use cases. Things we already know today. Okay? So, and that's all well and good. And I think the Lord Mayor and the professor made some really, really good point earlier. But one of the most important points they made is, the reason we're all here is to drive value. So I want to touch on how AI can drive value through a few different use cases. And these are use cases that we as SAS have been helping our organization driving through the use of AI. So let's take a few of those. First one, let's start with the WorldTrack. This is a relatively new use case for us and quite an interesting, innovative use of AI. So WorldTrack is an organization, and their goal is to drive conservation efforts, protect endangered species in Africa and other places. And it turns out one of the things that the researchers need to do when it comes to protecting endangered animals is to first understand where the hell they are, and how many there are. So how many cheetah there are, how many rhino there are in the wild. Now the traditional way to do that in an environmental friendly, animal friendly way is to look at footprints, animal footprints. So what they used to do is bring all these native trackers out to the field, literally look at the footprints, document them one by one. So it's an effective but a really tedious process and not very reliable. So through our partnership with WorldTrack, what the researchers now do is using computer vision. They use computer vision, deep learning techniques to help automate the process of analyzing, tracking, and matching those footprints. Really, really useful and interesting use of computer vision. And we're, at SAS, obviously very proud to be involved in this particular effort. Now, they're actually only just starting out on this journey because the next phase of the process, what they're trying to do, is use autonomous drones to actually collect those images to really, really scale that process. So really, really useful, really interesting use case. I think we're going to start to see more of these type of new use case using computer vision techniques. What about more traditional use case? Let's talk about Rogers and how they're using AI to improve customer services, improve customer satisfactions. Now, Rogers Telecom is a telecom out in Canada, and as those of you who work in telecom or other industries, they have extensive call center operation. They take hundreds and thousands of calls from their customers on a daily basis. What they have been struggling with is understanding exactly what their customers are talking about. You know, what topics, are they happy, are they complaining, what are they complaining about? So through the use of text analytics and natural language processing, they ought to get a much better understanding of what the customers are talking about, what they're complaining about. And as a result of that, reduce their customer complaint by 53%, which is a significant improvement. This particular use case obviously can be applied across a whole bunch of industries, and it's really common use of text analytics going forward. What about a local example? So WA Police is using AI to protect the communities. Now at SAS, we've had a long partnership with WA Police. In this particular case, we're helping WA Police to use machine learning and forecasting technique to predict crimes. So they're using time series data, to the point we made earlier, to help understanding where these crimes are happening, where are they likely to happen in the future. And as a result of that, it helps in terms of resourcing, planning, obviously ultimately creating a safer community for the people of WA Police, WA. Now, the law earlier made some really good point. I believe the use of open data from a government perspective is going to help drive a lot of new use cases in the government space and doing a lot of good in the community. Now, these three are just a small subset of the use cases that is possible. I think as practitioners, all of us, some of you in this room, as we get a better understanding of the newer techniques, how it all comes together, we're going to see some very new, interesting use cases through the use of AI going forward. So exciting times. Now let's shift to the second topic. What about technology? What role does technology play in using AI? What do you need to think about when it comes to leveraging technology properly? The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to take you through an example of how AI is deployed. Deployed in the process of driving automated customer interaction through AI, right? In this particular example, think of yourself as a bank, so you need to interact with your customer, and you want to use AI to automate the process of how you deal with the customers. You want to automate the process coming out with recommendations. So it could be next best offer, it could be next best action. So what are the processes involved in how you can do that? First of all, you need to make sure you have the data, right? Do you have all the customer data? Do you have all the transaction data that will allow you to learn through the patterns and build some sort of AI model? Secondly, you need to make sure using those data, you can uncover some sort of trends and pattern, as we talked about earlier, that you can automate through an AI model, right? So this is where most of the data scientists gets involved, using various different techniques to automate specific parts of the customer interaction as it relates to next best offer, as it relates to recommendation, as it relates to churn, for example. But once you've got the AI model, you now need to embed that into some sort of business process. And that's why a decision logic is very, very important in this conversation. I'm a big believer AI should not exist in complete isolation. AI should be considered integrated as your overall part of the business process. So there are other things you need to consider when it comes to building decision logics. For example, what is the current NPS score for this customer? For example, do you have any other marketing campaign going on at the same time? You need to treat all those elements holistically in order to improve your customer experience. So once you build the AI model, you build the decision logic, you now need to actually deploy that logic in some sort of customer interaction or channels. Now this is where the rubber hits the road, right? This is where the customer actually experience those AI-powered decisioning. And that could be done through call centers, branches, app, or even some sort of chatbot. But ultimately, technology will play a role in how you orchestrate, how you execute through the various part of the process. Okay? A very simple, but a very, very common example of how you can use AI to drive this type of automated customer service, customer decisioning. Now, the question we need to answer is, what do you need to drive this process from a technology point of view? Okay? So let's take a look at that. First of all, you do need machine learning. I'll give you that. So no points for guessing that you need machine learning. The machine learning will form the AI model to drive the process as it relates to customer recommendations. But you need more. Machine learning is not the whole story. It's important, but definitely not the whole story. you're going to need data management, right? We talked about earlier, data is the oil in the analytics economy. I think data is the lifeblood in the AI economy. It's incredibly useful as we need to train those AI models. Now, this is in the environment where data management is getting more complex. We have data on-prem, we have data in the cloud, we have different types of data. And that's not to cover the privacy and PII data implication today. That these challenges are making data management incredibly complex. I personally think we see increasing investment in the area of data management to drive AI outcomes and use cases. Visualization is important in this context because it allows you to explore and analyze the data to identify new patterns and trends that you can automate, that you can drive in a decisioning process. What about computer vision? We all know that computer vision is important. Take insurance claim, for example, right? As well as allowing your customer to feed through structured data in the insurance claim process, we should really allow them to feed through pictures. Picture of damaged cars, picture of the accident. Because that will streamline the claim process. They will improve the claim process through the use of pictures and computer vision. Natural language processing. We already talked about earlier. A huge part of your information repositories today are text data. And natural language processing and text analytics will allow you to explore those capabilities, those data in the AI process in ways that you probably haven't thought about before. What about forecasting and optimization? We think forecasting and optimization being increasingly used to supplement in conjunction with other machine learning techniques. Why would you want to do that? To solve more complex AI problems. So it's an important part of the AI portfolio in terms of forecasting and optimization. We're almost there. What about decision support? I already touched on. You need to have a robust decision support framework to embed your AI process, that integrate into other part of the business process, other part of the business landscape. And finally, you need to think about how you can deploy your AI process. Okay? I see a lot of companies, they do their data management, they build their model, and they think because they can build the model, they should be able to deploy the model. As some of you probably know, it's absolutely not true. Deploying is a complex process, and it's a lot of other consideration. So you need to make sure you have the right component when it comes to deployment of those AI models. Now, the important thing for organization today is not just having this component, but having it in an integrated platform-centric manner, because that will reduce costs, it will increase efficiencies. Okay? Now, there's a lot to think about, isn't there, when it comes to technology? If there's one thing I want you to think about when it comes to technology that I think a lot of organizations continue to struggle and get wrong, that will be deployment. Right? As I mentioned, this is where a lot of organizations, they're struggling, not just building the model, but getting the model out into production. Now, to emphasize the point, I borrowed a quote from Gartner, which I really liked. Gartner released a paper this year, and in that paper, they had this quote. And they say, building model is academic. Deployment is economics. I don't always agree with Gartner, but I think in this case, they absolutely nailed it. I speak to a lot of organizations that have lots of data scientists, they build lots of models, and when I ask them the question, have you deployed those models into a business process, into a customer interaction, and they look at me blank in the face. So if something you need to think about in investing, as you have this technology conversation, it is about deploying those models, because that's where you get the outcome, that's when you realize the value. All right, so let's shift to the people side of things. So we've talked about what AI is. We've talked about the technology requirements. Let's talk about people. In the age of silicon intelligence, some people like to call it, do we still need people? What role do people have in the age of AI? Turns out a heck of a lot. In fact, I would argue people are more important than ever in the age of AI. Now, there are many, many reasons for that. But there's one fundamental reason I want to talk about. And the way I'm going to do that is tell you something I learned from a customer. Now, I was involved in a conference recently where we had a panel discussion. And Liz Moore from Telstra, one of our customers, was on the panel. And during that panel discussion, somebody asked Liz the question, as someone starting out on the journey of data science and analytics, Liz, what is the most important thing, Liz, that we need to think about, we need to get right when it comes to being successful on this journey? Now, I was expecting Liz to say things like culture, organizational structures, technology. She didn't say any of that. What she said was incredibly insightful. What Liz said is, in order for you to be successful on this journey, is to find an interesting business problem. I'll add to that, you should be finding an interesting and valuable business problem. It turns out people are incredibly important to help you find the interesting business problem. Let's look at why that's the case, right? So I'm going to talk about the human versus machine comparison, my favorite topic today. If you look at on the left-hand side, we know now machine and AI and data science is incredibly good at processing, crunching large data sets, complex calculations, learning automation. What about people? It turns out we still have a few tricks up our sleeve. People are still very good, in fact much better than computing in a number of areas. For example, we're still good at common sense, we're good at intuitions, we're good at creativity, curiosity, and versatility. It turns out those characteristics will help us in unleashing creativities, ideas, and finding those business problems, those valuable business problems. So yes, people still play a role. In fact, a much, much bigger role into the future. Now, while I'm on the topic of machine versus human, I want to cover the one additional trait. There's one additional characteristic that we are definitely better than the machine. In fact, it's one thing that we're going to continue to rely on people more and more into the future. Anyone want to guess what that is? It was covered in the previous talk. And that's ethics. You probably heard a story of how some of the dilemmas faced by engineers as they program autonomous cars. In certain situations, how do we program in the logic to figure out who do we kill and who do we save? I think in the business perspective, we're also facing those type of dilemmas today. Let me give you a couple of examples. Doctor mentioned earlier some of the challenges, but I see company needing to ask a question around, should we really be automating certain type of process, first of all? And even if we get over that particular ethical question, the second question becomes, should we really be using certain types of data to drive AI-based automation? So these are really, really tough questions, and those questions will continue to rely on people to be able to help you answer. Think of it the other way around the challenge around ethics. The question becomes not whether we can do something, but should we do it? It's a big topic, so I look forward to speak to many of you during the break. But let's move on to a lighter topic and close off the human capital conversation. As well as creativity, what other thing you should be looking for in your people, right? We're seeing a shift in industry to multidisciplinary individuals, right? There's a shift to going from highly specialized individuals to people who are across different skill sets. In fact, so much so, that's kind of the vision we share with the Melbourne Business School. All right? As some of you know or participate in the course, in the Master of Analytics course, that's exactly what they do. They train people around business domain knowledge, statistical knowledge, also technology know-hows. These people will help you not only find your interesting, valuable business problem, but also executing on them. So, for those of you not involved, I encourage you to take a look at that program, both as a source of recruitment, also a platform where you can develop existing employees. It's a great program that MBS has developed here. Now, just to wrap it up, at SAS, we've been helping organizations transfer a world of data into a world of intelligence. We've been doing that for the last 42 years, believe it or not. This has been the vision on day one. It's continuing to be the vision today. The other thing is, whether it be statistical analysis, data science, machine learning, big data, AI, or something else next year, the vision is the same, and the fundamental approach to success and value hasn't really changed all that much, right? It's about finding the right people, finding people with the right skill sets. It's about unleashing their creativities and ideas in finding your interesting, valuable business problem. And once you have those things in place, it's about having the right technology platform so you can deploy those models and realize values. I think it's an extremely exciting time for all of us in this field, but I do think we all need to play a role in cut through the noise and turn the confusion around AI into excitement and execution. I thank you for your time. I look forward to speak to many of you during the break and then hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.